Blessed are the undefiled in the way, who walk in the law of the Lord. Blessed are they that keep his testimonies, that seek him with the whole heart. They also do no iniquity, they walk in his ways. Thou hast commanded us to keep thy precepts.
Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Ooh, wrong microphone. There we go. All right. We're continuing the book of Psalms. Psalm 32. We picked up the first couple of verses last week at the end of the study. Sorry, we're a little late today. We had to reboot our computer. I had such a delay on this camera right on my computer, not even with the internet. It was just, I'd wave my hand and then wait, and then it'd move. And that would translate, because the audio will not go with it. So, all right. So, blessed is the man to whom the Lord will not impute iniquity. Blessed is the man whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Unto whom the Lord imputeth not iniquity. Because you could say, blessed is the man, the Psalms do, blessed is the man that walks in the way of the Lord, that does everything that God says. Blessed is the man who walketh uprightly, who judges rightly, who respects the ways of the Lord and all his doings, and et cetera, and who has respect to the Lord and thinks upon him, and says, the Lord would not approve. But I don't know a lot of people like that. Of course, the scriptures say there's none righteous, no, not one. Because even the righteous men of the Bible, and I will insist on this, because it's always something that sort of bugged me. Like they would talk about Noah or some other Old Testament saint, and the way they would talk about them being justified is they were justified by the law. And that's not to say that that's not true, but the law provided a sacrificial system, which is like a shadow of what Christ did, which is like a the word shadow. Shadow is fine because that's the word that the Bible itself uses, but it also foreshadowed Christ, and it was the word it keeps. I don't want to use the word mock up, but it's like a. It represents it in a number of its points. Like the lamb without spot or blemish, and Christ was perfect, and that's really the reason I wanted to even say that. Is because he was perfect. It talks about Noah it says he was perfect, a just man and perfect, and same thing with Job, right? And we think they're righteous men, but Job offered sacrifices, and Noah presumably did so, and this indicates an appeal towards God, either acknowledging, like a righteous man can make sacrifice to God in the form of they have peace offerings and other kinds of things, meaning a sacrifice that is not a blood affair, a life affair, something that, because a blood affair represents some sort of transgression that, at least as far as I understand, that is involved in sin, and something for which it is sort of our life goes on the line, as far as like when we sin in a way that makes us I want to say unworthy of the life we've been given. Like, we're not worthy anyways. I mean, we're already unworthy, but then to further sin and transgress against God in a manner that the sacrifice required is it's some sort of it's a real violation of the righteousness of God, let's just say. all those people had to be forgiven. The sacrifices being accepted was by grace, because there's no other way. Because animal blood doesn't do anything for your sin, not a bit. And technically speaking, Jesus' blood, it's not that the blood is magical, it's that God accepts it. And that's what God, the one way to heaven is through him. Or where not one way, I don't even like saying it like that, I don't usually say it like that. The one way whereby you must be saved is the Lord from heaven. There's one name under heaven whereby we must be saved. One name given that saves. We will, and Christ is the only way you can take. That does not mean that God himself cannot open a door to someone in his mercy. Like Cornelius didn't know God. Cornelius, he feared God and did righteousness. He was good to the Jews. He was that righteous Gentile in the book of Acts who was respected by the community of Jews that he lived among, and also it was a man who feared God. And the Lord sent the apostle Peter to him to preach the gospel to him. Without God sending Peter, though he feared God, and though he was a good man, he was still effectively lost. Because God wanted to send him the word whereby he could be saved. And God can send this to people at his pleasure. At any time, God could send someone to an individual, and then all of a sudden, words that maybe, all of us have heard some form of the gospel in this English-speaking world, at least, most of us have heard some form of it. So it's hard to imagine a world in which someone hasn't heard of it yet, but they're still trying to live a right life in, proper orientation with the universe. They're trying to do that. And the grace and mercy of God can come to someone like that, and for the purpose of forgiving their sins, bringing to them the light of Christ. I feel like I got far afield somehow. Well, just the idea that imputing iniquity means counting it. God can count it against us. When he doesn't count it against us, on some level, that's what Christ does. So that iniquity is not imputed to us, but rather the righteousness of God, the righteousness of Christ specifically, is imputed to us. That means we looked that word up. It means to calculate, to compute. Like the big white throne, and then he pulls out the books, and in there is written all the works they've done. I don't want to see that book. Paul, let's see. I don't want to go anywhere near that judgment. And when we put our trust in Christ, we don't have to. He will not impute your iniquity to you because of what Christ has done. And truly, that is a blessing that is really beyond calculation, because without that, there is no hope. Without the mercy of God, in whatever form he chooses to put it, which is the form it took was Christ on the cross. That doesn't mean he couldn't be merciful in other ways, but that is the way he has ordained. And so all the mercy will proceed along those lines. At least since Christ. All the mercy of God is going to involve the gospel being preached to people. And people always ask, well, what about people who've never heard the gospel? It's like, God's mercy is always available to him, but it is his to give as he pleases or not. And so that is a matter that can be taken up with God himself. I always consider it, I don't deserve anything, so I definitely sympathize. Like, why should the gospel come to some and not to others? That is always like a question. But it's answered, and the Bible answers it, which is simply this, is like, I'm good. Your eye is evil because I am good. It is lawful for me to do what I will with my own. God does it because this is how he wants to do things. It's like it's not given for our, to please us, but rather to please Him. That's kind of important. When I kept silence, my bones waxed old through my roaring all the day long. For day and night thy hand was heavy upon me. My moisture is turned into the drought of summer. Selah. And the next line lets you know when I kept silence, what's he talking about? Well, I acknowledged my sin unto thee, and my iniquity have I not hid. I will confess my transgressions unto the Lord, and thou forgavest the iniquity of my sin. Selah. When I kept silence, I sinned, and then I kept silence. I didn't acknowledge my sin. I just did it. I just did it. Didn't acknowledge, hey, Lord, I did something wrong. I probably shouldn't have done that. I didn't seek God. I just did wrong, and I went my way as if it didn't matter. My bones waxed old through my roaring all the day long. I want to look if there's a better word for roaring. There's a lot of roaring, but I'm sure the word's fine, but it's just like in English, that's a little. We would use roaring probably differently. Like this is a biblical roaring. Let me just bring this up. It may actually mean to roar, like a lion or something. All right, I'm just not going to try to do this right. There we go. It could mean like a roaring, like the roaring of a lion. I mean, as far as the word. But what I'm saying is in their language, I think they think something a little different about that. Or it has a wider application. This roaring, I know it from several places. I'm trying to remember. Where's am I roaring? Let's see. Yeah, Psalms, Paul. There you go. Put your brain on straight. 32. All right. Sorry. When I restarted my computer, I had this all set up, and then it was like, restart your computer. Roaring. Shiaga, a roaring. Okay. Because I'd like some help here. Hey, roaring really? Used of lions or of invaders? Of a lion. Conquering king. Okay. Human cry in distress. Yeah, I guess that's like what's saying, like example, Psalm 30. There we go. Psalm 22. And the words of my roaring. It's funny when we went through Psalm 22. You are far from helping me and from the words of my roaring. From sha'ag, which is a rumbling or moan. Yeah, I think of the roaring of a lion. You know what I mean? I just really think if it's call of human emotion, meant to be obviously sort of a more like look at here. Let's see, the New American Standard says groaning, roaring. I liked moaning. I thought moaning was kind of a good one. I'm a rumble or moan, whatever. It's a wordless sound uttered from the throat. But when I think about roaring, like the roaring of the sea, and actually, now this is definitely used of a roaring of a lion, but there is another word used for, there are different forms. I don't know. I don't know if this is the same root word that would use like for the roaring of the sea or something like that. The rumbling. It may be, it's all the same in the end. It's all just a wordless, it could be that, it could be whatever. It's all contextual. Which means that, you have to determine for certain what it means in its context. So, obviously, his bones are waxing old through his moaning or groaning all the day long. My inner, like it says, the Spirit makes intercession with groanings which cannot be uttered. Was it groanings? Whatever. There's wordless things that we utter from ourselves. And they didn't have a specific word, apparently, just for a groan, I guess. It's also a roar, a groan are the same things. But you think about a lion's roar, there's different kinds, right? You ever hear a lion? They have like the roar, that kind of roar, but there's also a lot of like if you listen to them, sometimes they make some real pathetic sounding groaning, which is a roar technically too. So I don't, that could be part of it. For day and night thy hand was heavy upon me, my moisture is turned into the drought of summer. Notice he uses several poetic things like my bones waxed old. My bones waxed old through my roaring all the day. Obviously not literally, right? It is a emotional state. It's like, when people become old, oftentimes they lose some of their mobility and their joints and the flexibility. And, it's like, so he's saying is like, I was like crippled. Like I felt old. I felt I felt the loss of the energy and, vivaciousness of life depart from me. It's like I got old. I kept it to myself, and I was moaning within myself. What's interesting is that, I don't know, I guess when I read this, it sounds to me like he is well aware of his sin. But he dare not speak it to the Lord, which is interesting. I mean, because I always assume, well, the Lord knows. I definitely sometimes act, like when I've transgressed, there have been times when I just sort of went my way. I didn't acknowledge it to the Lord. Many times, obviously you don't go right off the bat and say, oh, I'm sinning. Sorry, Lord. I mean, who does this, right? A lot of times by the time you get to the sin, there's the phase of the iniquity has already, the decision was made at some point, and then you didn't consult the Lord, and then you're on to it, and the realization of that it's gone too far, that it is a sin now, is not always right there. Like a lot of times you start doing something, it can be with things that are progressive. Like some things you have a little bit of conscience on, well, and sometimes, like I was thinking of sometimes people have, some of the sins is like they buy too much stuff for themselves or whatever, it's like there's things like that people have. They go on spending sprees, and maybe they start off, they don't know. Or like gambling, it's like, you have I see people buy at the gas station these scratch cards. I never bought one in my life, but some people buy them all the time, right? And it's probably at some point that probably can become a sin to people. You know what I mean? I'm sure for some people it is. It's like they spend way too much money on it. It's wasteful, and they're not taking care of what or for some, maybe it's their entertainment. I don't know. I don't judge it. I don't. But I know for some people, they probably think like, I shouldn't buy these. And they're probably right. I shouldn't. But there's some point along the way in which it's okay, but you don't realize that you're straying over into the land of sinfulness. And so we must be alert in that regard. But when he knows his sin, he feels there is something more to do than just hold it inside. He must confess it. But like I said, I don't identify with this so much because, like as far as I feel like, I identify with the idea of day and night your hand was heavy upon me and my moisture is turned to the drought of summer. When I feel like I've got sin on me, I feel that like, spiritually dried up. I don't feel like watered. I feel like I need something. I need to get the sin off my back, most likely. And the feeling of guilt of having transgressed, it's heavy. Especially because a lot of times there's nothing to be done anymore. It's done. The deed is done. The thought of God's wrath. The thought of God's, and this is not, and I don't identify with it on two levels. One, I don't fear the wrath of God coming upon me because I trust in Christ. I do fear the wrath of God. I think the wrath of God is a fearful thing. I mean, on a principle point. But I do not have a visceral fear of God. Like I'm like I have this instinctive terror that I need to run from him, because our instinct needs to be to run to him for safety, and as opposed to away. Because getting right with God and my sin is the best, protection I have. Because because if I can draw near to God, he is my fortress, he is my rock. He is the judge, but he's also my protector, and he's also the only place I can actually get forgiveness, and the only power from which I can have safety. Like, I can go to him. It's like when you get like a presidential pardon. Nobody can they can talk about it all they like. If the president pardons someone, whatever president, I don't mean this in particular, there's always controversial pardons in presidencies. In the past I can't think of anyone that didn't have a, it's controversial because when you're pardoning someone who's in all likelihood committed a crime. You know what I mean? Most of them are not, actually innocent, though some people are, of course. Of course. But there's a lot of people who get pardons just because maybe their sentence was too heavy or things like that. Or just because they feel like, whatever, they want to do a friend a favor. But when you get a pardon from God, it's like the reason the president, when he gives it, it's like there's no authority above him that can take that away from you. As far as if it's something under his jurisdiction. Just like a governor's pardon in a state will pardon you from a state crime, and no one can do anything to bring you into jeopardy again on that crime, as far as I know. But same thing with the Lord. It's like it's the ultimate. It's not a get out of jail free card, though. I mean, I wasn't going to say that. But it's the ultimate way to be free from sin is to have the man who, or the one who is in charge and ultimately responsible for making you pay for it by his own will. If you get a pardon from him, now you have a very official pardon. When our pardon is of God, it is official. It is, and if there was fear of men, I mean that men might want to make you pay also for your sin. Sometimes that's the case. Some sins, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. You can get right with God, but men are still going to want to talk to you about that because society can't have people stealing and killing and running around. And so there may be a price to pay on that score. But in other minor sins, the men will not trouble you. You might get away with it, so to speak. I mean, we just do all the time. And I identify this most with like things that bother me over time. Like a sin I find, like when I find myself embroiled in a sin, when I would find myself in the past, like, under the control of something, like something is running me and I don't like it. A behavior, whatever it happens to be, something's running me and it's interfering with my life, like it's getting into places where it shouldn't. It's caught, or it just exists. It's a secret. Only I know about it. That kind of stuff. But God knows, and I know that it's wrong. But if I persist in it, I can feel. You can get this sense of this heavy hand of God upon you, not to judge or destroy you, but like, speaking to your conscience. The Lord ought to speak to our conscience, and he does, through the Spirit. The Spirit speaks to your conscience, telling you, you shouldn't do that. You should obey God. And that can be heavy. Like knowing you do wrong and seeing it continually, knowing God disapproves. It has this possibility of like drying up your moisture into drought. Like Jesus talked about the well of water coming up from inside of you, welling up to life everlasting. It is a source of life. But also, it is also the source, water in life is like refreshment. It's necessary. Like when you feel thirsty, does really anything else matter? Like other than thirst? Because we cannot live very long without drinking. In the spiritual drink of fellowship with God, when you have some people don't have no relationship with God and they go on through their life in their own way. But when you have a spiritual life and you're mindful of these things, we need to be watered by the Spirit. That means we need to have the flow. And to me, the way I experience that is when I have a good relationship with God, and and I feel that I'm well grounded in obedience to Him, and I have some sort of rapport, meaning I have prayer and I'm hearing from God in the Spirit. Meaning, when I hear from God in the Spirit, it's not like the day I received the Holy Spirit where I got this power come into me and I, whoa, there's something going on. It's just when the righteous things of God, which I have learned in the Scripture, come to my mind, and I am reminded in different situations, like I feel like a flow of the same and similar ideas that you find in the Scripture, but packaged and reformed by the Spirit into new, not so much new, but into into a sort of just in their own form, like putting it into your own words. I mean, it's like you're getting the same idea reinforced into your mind over and over. But like when you have that flow of like God's word and obedience, and it creates good feelings and lively feelings, and you feel empowered in your life. That's what it does for you. You feel empowered and strong in the Spirit, and you feel well watered. But when sin is heavy upon you, you become, it's there. You know what I mean? And God knows it there. And when you don't want to give it up, sometimes you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to acknowledge it. I'm not fearful God is about to destroy me, but I am. But the sins, they interfere with the good feelings, because now we got to discuss sin. The Lord says, instead of the things I want to hear, I hear you shouldn't do that. That is something, you should obey God. You want things to go good for you? Obey me all the time. Then you'll have no reason to blame yourself for anything going wrong. You can be like Job. I haven't done anything wrong. Why is this happening? Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Naked came I into the world, and naked I go out. If God wants to throw me into a pit of lions, blessed be the name of the Lord. At least I know I didn't do it to myself. At least I know I'm right with Him. You know what I mean? And if this is how my life ends up, well then whatever. God gives, God takes away. Blessed be God. What am I going to complain about? I just don't like being the cause of my own demise. I just don't want His wrath to burn against me. If something bad's happened to me, and it's God's in control, but I know it isn't His wrath. I know it isn't His wrath. Job knew because he was upright, because he'd done all the things he was supposed to do. And if he did anything wrong, he made sacrifice. And if he did someone wrong, he made restitution. And his kids, if they'd done wrong, he made sacrifice for them. He covered all the bases. He was perfect in the reckoning of God because there is forgiveness in those. He wasn't a major transgressor. I'm not a major transgressor. I never killed anybody. You know what I mean? I'm no murderer. I'm no thief. Not, I've stolen in my life, but I don't do it. It's not something I practice. I'm certainly no robber. I've never robbed someone. I caught shoplifting when I was a kid. And then one time I saw some change when I was young. A big pile of change someplace. I won't say exactly where. And it was tempting. When you see, imagine you see a mountain of change, like literally a mountain of change in public, just laying there. Imagine if you went to a drinking fountain, not a drinking fountain, they had those wishing wells. I used to go to this mall when I was a kid, and there was they had water in the mall. It was cool. It was running. They got rid of it. There was a big fish tank. This is Woodfield Mall in Schaumburg, where I grew up. And they had water everywhere. And there was always all this money in the fountain because people were throwing it in, making wishes. It was cool. But imagine if like you walked in and it was just filled with change. You know, it's very hard not to be tempted to just take a fistful of change. That's what I did. I stole. But I'm not, that was the last time like that. I mean, but there's all kinds of other petty, will men rob God? Wherein have you robbed me? In tithes and in offerings. There's robbery that goes beyond. That's why I say, but what I'm saying is like the heavy, like I said, there's like, you would look at that and say like, well, taking the money out of a fountain, or maybe downloading, copyright material, it's not quite the same as walking up to someone in the night with a knife and extracting their wallet from them. Granted. But I'm saying those smaller transgressions, you can see how those can easily be covered. David, when he committed adultery, like he was not suffered to just walk away from that. God's like, no, you did this in secret, but I'm going to punish you publicly. The things I'm going to do because of this are going to happen in public, but my mercy will not depart from you. He punished him, but his mercy did not depart. I don't think God's mercy, I never fear God's mercy departing from me. Because I would fear it if I took it lightly, if I did not fear him. You know what I mean? That I knew he could take it away. I don't mistrust him like that. Because he promised me he wouldn't. As far as I know, there's nothing that there are things I could do, but there's nothing that I'm willing to do. You know what I mean? All the things that I'm willing to do, the transgressions, are things that I'm supposed to be able to be forgiven for. And that makes it even harder sometimes to stop, because it's like knowing that God is going to forgive you. Knowing that all the transgressions can be forgiven. Why do I not do any? Well, because I want to please God, right? We keep ourselves from the big things, not just because they're big sins. Like I said, to me, it's not like, why am I not a robber? It's not because I'm so virtuous. It's just I don't have it in me, And a man that would rob another man, it's like, that's sinful, but there's also power in that, He might also be the kind of person who would do other things, dynamic activity by nature. I always feel like that, I always say to my wife that a lot of the things we look at in our personalities as faults also have a side that's a virtue, Like it's been observed by some that sometimes I go a little, I run a little hot and cold as far as like activity levels. I have intense periods followed by more lethargic periods. I'll be very active and like really push. But then I get exhausted and I got to like chill out a bit. So it's, I'd rather have just a consistent burn about the middle, but it's never worked out so good for me. I forgot why I brought that. Oh, but like, being able to focus in those intense moments, it's like the things I'm able to do with that focus. Would I want to trade them for just a steady burn of less? Like, I don't think that some things can be done without the intensity. They probably could, but for me, I'm just saying that there's a side to it. I can see a positive side to it. I can see a positive side to a lot of things. Like I remember there was a kid in our neighborhood, and when he was a little guy, he used to give the bus the finger. The bus would drop him off, and he'd stand there with his hand raised up in the air. I want to keep my hand, so I don't have to blur. He's like, "Hey, bus!" Giving the bus driver, he gave the bus the finger, but ultimately he's giving the bus driver, isn't he? Or is he just the whole bus? Probably, I don't know. I never asked him, like, were you flicking off the whole bus or just the driver? Probably the whole bus, huh? I don't think it was animosity for that. It was just school, probably. I don't know. Some people thought, oh, that's terrible. It's not exactly, you don't want your kid giving the bus the finger. But I see positive in that. I see this child is bold. He speaks his mind. I never would have dreamed of flicking off the bus. I admire boldness. I do. I had some very bold relations growing up, cousins and stuff that I hung out with, and I loved them because of it. I was more reserved. And in my time now, people think, Paul, you reserved. It's like, yeah, because my outspokenness and my outgoingness are learned behaviors. They're not natural to me. Just like someone who's outspoken, like that guy. He's older now. He was a little kid. He used to flick off the bus. Now he's a very reserved, polite person. Very reserved, polite. Wouldn't give anybody the finger. Because he learned to control that impulsive, not fear, sort of a fearlessness. The impulsive fearlessness that is natural to him. He learned to control it for the sake of, hey, I want friends and people to like me or whatever. I don't know. I never asked him, like, why'd you stop doing that? So I just raised right. Parents, they had to work around the rough edges. Every kid, needs a bit of work. I like that. I don't have a problem with it. I don't want my kids flicking off the bus, of course, but I do like the spirit. I like the spirited people. I always tell my wife about that. You've got spirit. I like that. I like that in a woman, right? That's what they say. But, it's a joke in the movies. It's like, I like a woman with spirit, It's usually the prelude to some sinister person being creepy, but I mean it in all sincerity. I acknowledge my sin, my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transit. Thou forgave the iniquity of my sin. My sin has an iniquity to it. I like the way it's portrayed like that. The iniquity of my sin. Usually I just think of iniquity as a singular thing. There's sin and iniquity. Now what exactly iniquity is, from a kid I was always like, what's this iniquity stuff? Because it's not a word we use in common, it's not in common use. No one ever says like iniquity just at the Walmart or something, like. Not that people talk much about sin, but sin I understood. Sin people know. Even if they don't talk about it, people understand sin. Concept. They've heard of it. And even if they haven't heard the word sin, and these days I suppose there are people coming up who haven't heard of sin, what it is. They certainly have experienced it. They've been sinners, and they've been sinned against. Everyone learns about sin when they're sinned against. That's where because people are like, they care about themselves. You've sinned against me. I didn't notice when I did that to everyone else before, but now I noticed that it's happened to me. When I was stepping on their toes, I didn't think, well, I'm sinning. But now that someone's trotting on mine, I think that this is a transgression of sorts. I wonder what iniquity is in this context. Is it the usual word for iniquity? Let's see. I don't know. Is there a usual word, right? Avon. Spelled just like Avon, like the makeup company. Or what does Avon sell makeup, or is it pantyhose? I don't know. Avon calling. I remember that. I don't know what that means. They used to show up door to door with their female wares, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what Avon does. Do they even exist? Is that still going on? Here we go. Avon. Probably spelled Avon. Yeah, Avon. This is what iniquity, guilt, punishment for iniquity. That's really helpful, huh? I never looked up the word just iniquity. Like, is this an English definition? I will look at that, but I just want to see the Hebrew Strong's. Fault, iniquity, mischief, punishment of iniquity. from ava, which means perversity, moral, evil. This dash, everything after this means translated fault, iniquity, mischief, punishment. Comes up a lot in the Bible. On the right-hand side, I'm looking here at the Englishman's Concordance. It's used 231 times. And these are all the different forms. This is why I give up on Hebrew. Because it's like, this would be hard enough, but then to recognize that these are the same, you know what I mean? Awonika, awoninu, awonini. You know, I guess once you get the grammar, it makes more sense. But then I have to read it in like this form, which is the Hebrew letters here. Just trying to highlight it. That's the part, you know. Having to translate it, you know, it's like anything. I was telling my kids, you want to play a musical instrument, you got to practice. You want to learn a foreign language, you got to practice. You got to go over this stuff all the time until it becomes familiar. And I didn't have the patience for it. I didn't. And plus, I had other things going on. Starting a family, writing music. So I opened it twice. So there's avon. Iniquity, guilt, punishment for iniquity. So the word fault was in there, and perverseness was like the root idea, I guess. Iniquity, moral or grossly unfair behavior. A den of iniquity. That's how we use iniquity today. Yeah, a den of iniquity. Iniquity we think of as a very strong word now. But what does it mean in the Bible? Good question. Gross injustice, wickedness, a wicked act or thing. Sin. Yeah, maybe. But in this context, the way I think of it, and contextually is always the best way to look at a word, is how is it being used. And if it's the iniquity of my sin, I take the sin to be the actual act. Like I sinned a sin. I know sin in Greek has the idea of, I didn't even look at the word sin here. What is it? The Hebrew word. Oh yeah, chata, sin. We never actually looked at the word sin, did we? Before. Let's look at it real quick right now. Sin in the Old Testament is this word chata. Or chata'a. I'm going based on it. Chata'a. And let's see what the root meaning of sin is in Hebrew. An offense. Sometimes habitual sinfulness and its penalty, occasion, sacrifice, expiation. Oh yeah, because sometimes they'll talk about sin and they just mean the offering, but that's the way it's used. Punishment, purifying, sin, sinner, offering. Okay. And it's used 300 times in the Bible. So this word for sin, the Greek word for sin has an interesting, and it's similar. The hamarteo, which is the Greek word, it means to miss the mark. Right? And there's also a bit of that in this when it says an offense. I mean, some offense has been committed. Somewhere, either written down or informally, is the idea that of right and wrong. There's a right thing, there's a wrong thing. And when you offend right and wrong, you've sinned. Now, you can sin ignorantly. It talks about these things I did in ignorance. You know? There are sins of ignorance. But iniquity is something else. Iniquity is something, it is that aspect of humanity. It is like the sinfulness. I mean, there is such a thing as a sin can be an iniquity, but is being put for the wickedness that brings about sin. Iniquity is the idea of fault. There's a faultiness in us that causes us to sin. You know what I mean? It's not just the transgression. It's the thing about me that makes me transgress. That's my iniquity. At least contextually, that's how I read it in this passage. My iniquity is something about me, something sinful, my sinfulness in me that causes me to sin. It's the part of me that is reprehensible, that is unrighteous. The iniquity of my sin is the perverse aspect of my character that's leading me to sin. Because it's good enough to forgive the sin, right? But also there's something deeper. I'm not just sinning. I'm a sinner. I'm a man who has a sinful nature. And therefore, not only the sin ought be, or kind of needs to be forgiven, but also the iniquity of the sin. For example, I run to examples in my life, of course, and I'm trying to remember the specifics of this, but it's like, sometimes, like, let's for example, this is a good example. I interrupt people frequently in conversation. I'm actually a pretty rude person by nature. I was raised that way. I was raised by rude and crude people. Nice people, good people, people you'd like. But they, part of our nature is we are rude and crude, And it's not easy to unlearn, right? So there's sometimes I'm with people I love, like, appreciate, respect, and I find myself, I don't want to be the one talking all the time. Whatever. I don't want to go into the details of like how to navigate the space when you are rude and crude and occasionally obnoxious. But when you are, there's a space you have to navigate. Well, when I'm rude to someone, it's not just the act of rudeness. It's like there's iniquity in me. Like I don't properly, what is it? It's I don't properly value them, or I don't properly respect them. I'm not really listening. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's more to it than just the fact of it. There's something about me that's not optimal. You know what I mean? That's not right. That is not, and so it caused me to sin against people. Sometimes without my really understanding why I'm doing it. You know what I mean? Like because I have more respect to what I have to say than to what anyone else has to say. And that ought not to be. I mean, sometimes you don't want to take a back seat. Sometimes you need to assert yourself. It's like, no, listen to me. You know what I mean? Sometimes that's just the way it has to be. You can't just, you can give someone some time to speak, but if you can't get a word in edgewise, and you need to have an edgewise word, meaning like, wait a second, this isn't right. I got to cut in. My problem is actually, sometimes I interrupt people I'm agreeing with to voice agreement, because I kind of like it when people voice agreement. And I do like conversations that are free-flowing. Just like you see in my Bible study, there's no specific direction per se, except that we're following the scriptures. This is the direction. Whatever this thing says, we're going to talk about. But if there's no direction in a conversation, I'm fine with it. But sometimes people are trying to make a point. And then I'm trying to have the kind of discussion I like, which is free and open, and I just interject, and then we just go off. But it's not always time for that. Sometimes people really have something they want to communicate, and they just want to be listened to, not have their a running commentary over everything they're saying, or interjections of agreement, or of let me show you how I understand what you're saying by giving you a example. I'll make an analogy, or sometimes that's fun, but sometimes I frustrate people, and I don't. A lot of times, I try to be aware. Some people aren't. I know people who are not aware at all they sin against people all the time, and they don't. I feel like they can't possibly realize that they're offending people. Because if I was offending people that much, I would become very self-conscious about it. Like I said, I'm not totally conscious of it, but I am definitely conscious of talking too much. I always feel a little weird after a Bible study, like I talk too much. But obviously, people are here to listen, so it's not like here's my big chance. You want to talk, Paul? Yak away. You're not offending anybody. So, sin carries in some ways. Now, don't take this too specifically, like I'm establishing some sort of dogma about iniquity. I'm not. Sometimes iniquity is just an act of sin. In the Bible, that's the way it's used. It's not always the iniquity of my sin. But you can see the word iniquity has that power of it. It doesn't have to stand alone. It can be some aspect of sinfulness. Sometimes a sin, because the sin is the most generic term. It means the actual act of like, something went wrong. I did something wrong, right? That's the basic idea. Whereas it's a very general term in that case. Like sins can be classified. I don't want to classify like in a scientific classification, but they could be characterized, maybe that'd be better, as this is an iniquity. This is perversity. This is mischief. Though, what each one is, there's a bit of overlap. I mean, like, I couldn't say like, well, thieving, that's obviously mischief, and lying, that's obviously iniquity. Like, I don't know, like each of those can be, there's overlap. And so then you get usages such as this, the iniquity of my sin. Very interesting, though, because it provokes thought. Now, we had a Selah up here, and we have a Selah over there. Now, I was taught, and I don't see a reason when this is wrong, but these are meant to be suspensions. Some people say that means musically. It was like for a musical interlude, like leave a space there. But oftentimes in music, interludes are there for the purpose, which I was taught, was that these were points of meditation, like where you stop, pause, and meditate on what has just been said, or in the case of a song, sung. And both may be true. It may have been a pause in the singing while the music continued, or just a pause in the music altogether. Just a pause for silence, maybe. But whatever, the point may be in both cases to invoke a meditative state. To say, here, for a moment, think about this. Remember that your times, when you were dried up, right? When you were holding from communicating, from talking to God about your sin. Sometimes when I get into trouble, or when I'm having a troubling time, I'm not actually in trouble, but it's like, I just mean like I may be in a mental state of trouble. I'm troubled in my mind, and I don't need to be. I'm troubled in my heart because I'm like, what am I going to do about this? What am I going to do? And I start feeling like, which way forward? I don't know. What am I supposed to do? I got to do something about this. And I know it. And the thing is that sometimes I could go spiraling down into negativity, where I know God doesn't want me to be, where I know I'm being sinful in a sense by my negativity. My negativity itself is sinful. Because long ago, when confronted with the problem, I should have called upon the Lord. You know what I mean? Like if I'm about to commit a sin, like back in the day, when I was going to go do something, I don't want to be specific. But I was making a decision to sin. I mean, I don't mind specifying the sins of my past. I'm just not going to use any particular one, but you've heard before. You know my sins. Think of any one of them. Think of your sins. Sometimes when you're going to sin, before you do it, you know you're going to do it. In fact, many times you know you're going to do it before you do it. It's some sins are spontaneous. Those are probably the most. We think of those as being. We want to forgive ourselves for those, right? Because it just sprung on you in a moment, and and oftentimes just circumstances bring out the iniquity in us, and we sin. But other times, full well you're making a decision to sin, and that's when you should be praying. That's when you should turn to the Lord, but we don't, because we want to sin. And we shouldn't, but we do. But not that always. I mean, I tried to make a habit, and I still try to make, when I feel an urge to do something I know I shouldn't, to pray first. Now, it doesn't have to even be that, like when I get some, like if I'm starting to get down in the dumps about maybe a situation, maybe I'm being harried with a situation and I'm starting to feel anxiety. I don't realize that I don't know I'm sinning. Something happened. It hit me. Bam. Blindsided. Bam. And I'm like, what's going on? I was getting worried or anxiety about a situation. And I'm letting it turn into a sin. Because I should have turned to God right away. Just like to prevent the sin I knew I was going to commit, when one I didn't realize, when hit with some adversity, instead of like falling into anxiety and fear, it's not always fear, more, I would call it, I have anxiety issues sometimes. I wouldn't, like, the anxiety and fear, is there really a difference? You know what the difference is? I don't like the sound of fear. I'd rather admit to anxiety. You know what I mean? Because I prefer that. That doesn't sound as bad. You know what I mean? You know, it's like, I don't know. Well, it's like a lot of things with language. We prefer the word that doesn't sound so bad, though it's the same. It's like when I said, I said in a study last week something about babies being wicked, and I said especially they're desperately wicked or something like that, and someone didn't like that because the word was too top shelf, and I agree, it was probably way too high. It was too babies aren't that bad. I just meant that they have in their hearts, just like us all. You know, I was conceived in sin. I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. And we go astray from the womb. Children have the same sinful tendencies, and they're selfish, and you know, I mean, it's like, but they're babies, obviously, and they don't really know what they're doing. They just are by nature creatures of sin. You know, they must. I mean, we have to. Children must be civilized. They must be taught not to behave like animals. It's, you know, I don't know if you raised kids, you should know that. Look at people who don't try to raise their kids to be civilized. They are animals. Some kids are like animals. I mean, they're animal in their passions. You know, they haven't been made to consider, to have empathy for other people. Animals don't. Some animals have a bit of empathy, right? Some of the more, as I remember, there's a term I remember reading, soulish animals that seem more soulish, like the big mammals mostly, you know, we think of as being somewhat kin. We identify with dogs. And we feel like the dogs identify with us somewhat, don't we? We feel like they have some sympathy or empathy. They're different things. I don't know. I don't know the precise what dogs feel or whatever, but I get the point. With other people, we have sympathy, empathy. We try to. But we don't want our children to grow up like animals. We want to teach them empathy. There are other people to consider besides themselves. But babies don't. So I don't want to go too top shelf with my language all the time, right? Certainly not against myself. My sin? Well, that was just a little anxiety, not fear. And I don't like to qualify. I don't really think it was fear. Well, in the sense of this is the way I would say it. Because if I define fear as like, I thought something bad was going to happen, then I was not fearful. I didn't think anything bad was going to happen. Well, what caused me anxiety was not knowing what to do and having too many possible things to do at the same, like needing to take action somewhat, being in a point of crisis. And not knowing what path to take gives me anxiety. Like I get anxious because I have to make a decision and I have too many choices. And I happen to be the kind of person, if you watch me study, you notice I have a lot of insight. You know what I mean? Like I'll make insightful commentaries on small things. That extends to every part of my life. So when I get in a crisis, I usually see more options than other people. But because I'm actually not a very judgmental person, I find that stressful because I have trouble picking which way do I go. And so many times, because so many times in my life, I see all options that I can take. Not all options, but I see all these options, these different options that are possibilities to me. And many times I've chosen the wrong option, which has cost me money or wasted time. You know, I chose to spend time on things that were probably not, or money, like I'll get this fixed or I'll spend money on that. And then they're down the drain. Like last week, I wanted to get my pickup truck fixed. And I thought, well, maybe it's this ignition control module. I hadn't tested everything, but I thought this is a likely suspect because of the weirdness of the problem. And I've had something like that before where it wouldn't ignite on a similar car made by the same manufacturer. So I thought, ignition control module, $50 bet, right? And I made it and I lost because it didn't fix the problem. And now I'm thinking maybe I won't even fix that car because am I going to just keep throwing good money after bad? At least when I'm short of money. If I had a lot of money, I'd probably just send it to the mechanic, and pay him to do it and save myself the time. But then I have neither time nor money. Both are precious, and I'm spending both on things that aren't profitable. That gives me anxiety. It makes me anxious about the choices I make in the future. And I probably should have prayed about it all in the beginning. I should pray about those things. The tendency is, I said, I do not, I prepare for the defense of my home against people who hate me. Right? Because I can, and I feel like it's my responsibility to do what I can. I trust in the Lord, primarily for my safety, but I would not want to be a fool and being known to the public not think at all of contingencies of safety and if I how to deal with like a home invasion. I live in the country, so I've got to, by the time you call 911, it might be they're not slow around here. I mean, one time I had to call 911, and they were there within 15 minutes, so they react pretty quickly. It depends. We have. My 911 goes to a county authority. I don't have a town or a village. Some people do. Many people do. I grew up in a town where 911 would go to the police station, the local police, and they would come. And out here, think for yourself a bit. So, things I can do for myself, I do because I feel like if I don't make that preparation, I'm being foolish. I'm tempting God in a certain sense because I'm saying, God will protect me. So logical things that I could do for my safety, I won't do because I don't think I have anything to fear. And the thing is, it'd be one thing if I was on a mission from God, where it's like, go, and he's like, go, don't take care, don't take a weapon, don't worry about nothing. You just go, like when he sent his disciples. Take no shoes, take no extra shoes, take no scrip, take no bag for begging, take no money, take no food. Don't take an extra coat, just go. Well, then you go. You don't do the normal things. But if I'm just going camping, I bring a back extra pair of shoes all the time when I go camping. Why? Because I have a lot of experience camping. When you go camping, your feet get wet. So you want an extra pair of shoes and at least 2 extra pairs of socks. Because you prepare. You don't be like, I'll trust the Lord, my feet won't get wet. Your feet might get wet. You know what I mean? Like I'm saying, I trust God in big and small things. I do too. But, you know what I mean? I make my own breakfast in the morning. I don't pray it into existence. I don't. And neither do you, right? So we think we got to do something. So again, in these certain situations, and I think this is mine to take care of. And it probably is, because it is mine. Do I pray, oh Lord, do I fix my truck? Well, maybe I should, especially because it's a bigger situation. I'm not just deciding to fix a truck. I'm taking a path. That's for a reason. Should I do all this? And I don't know. I don't even know if maybe God's answer to me is, Paul, figure it out. But when I start getting anxious, I got to remember that God is working everything. Even me taking 2 shoes to the campsite. That's something he taught me. So, should I not, in my anxious circumstances, also turn to God for these things? It's not wrong. Just because you can do it yourself doesn't mean it's like, don't bother God about it. What I'm saying by it is, you do what you can, but you always bother God. You know what I mean? You should always talk to the Lord because you never know when the Spirit might return and give you clear direction. You know, a lot of times, when I'm doing things which I think God wants me to take care of myself, I presume that that's what He wants. It may not be so. So we're out of time. For this shall everyone that is godly pray unto thee in a time when thou mayest be found. Surely the floods of great waters, they shall not come nigh unto him. When you are confessing and right with God, the floods will not overtake you. You will be hidden in God, preserved from trouble. You will compass me about with the songs of deliverance. Yeah, I hate stopping here because I kind of already established that, but maybe it's all right. Maybe we'll all remember how there's 3 Selahs in a row there. You notice that? 1, 2, 3, real close packed. It's not usual. But this is, seek ye the Lord while He may be found. We'll leave that for tomorrow. We are past. We're 5 minutes over. But when thou mayest be found, that's a key we're going to have to key on. What does that mean? There's times when God can be found and times when He can't? What? Is God hard to find sometimes? Where are you, Lord? Sometimes He is hard to find. Is He hiding? Why is He so hard to find? Why is God so hard to find? I find Him hard to find. Sometimes it's hard to find God. But He always may be found. Right? God can always be found. Or at least it's not Him. You know what I mean? It's me. That's the problem. It's not that God's hiding. He seems like He's hiding, but God's always where God is. God always is there. He's always never not there. It's me who was in the right place. Anyway, so we'll talk about that more next time. We'll begin with verse 6, and I'm sure we'll probably finish the psalm tomorrow, though there's no guarantees. Anyways, thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to being back again tomorrow. We'll have a full week of studies ahead of us. And the music.
Blessed are the undefiled in the way, who walk in the law of the Lord. Blessed are they that keep His testimonies, that seek Him with the whole heart. They also do no iniquity, they walk in His ways. Thou hast commanded us to keep Thy precepts.
have affected
The invasion begin. Feels like years ago, but maybe that's the mileage talking. Maybe that's the mileage talking. In all the time fighting Los Muertos, we've traveled far and lost some friends, but we've learned some new tricks along the way. You know what, cabron? I think it's time for a fresh start. We can be ready for some zombies and seem to have picked up some new tricks. But the best part is, I finally know how to shoot into a crowd of zombies without hitting any of my compadres. It took long enough. We learned to organize ourselves. Makes it easier to keep the... Yeah, you don't know the half of it. Talking. In all the time fighting Los Muertos, we've traveled. In all the time fighting Los Muertos, we've traveled far and action faster than ever. Oh, my favorite. Half of it. Pity, cabrón. The apocalypse. Just wait till you see it now. There are surprises around every corner and friggin' hard decisions to make. Just on the fight. We favorite. Me. My compadres. New tricks. Shoot into a crowd of zombies without hitting any of my compadres. It took long enough. We learned